from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 41 through 51. Now, every year, his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival had ended, they started to return. The boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. The word of God for a people of God. Thanks be to God. To begin, I have to tell you about this phenomenon in Christianity. It spans churches and denominations, even eras, and it concerns this particular Sunday. This Sunday after Christmas, just like its counterpart, the Sunday after Easter, are known as low Sundays in the church, as in low attendance Sundays in the church. Among clergy circles, it has another nickname. It's known as Associate Sunday. Traditionally, senior pastors are resting and recuperating from the high holy days, and us newbies get the pulpit. If you look around this morning, you will see that indeed we are in observance with this tradition here at St. Lucas today. You've got me, an intern, a student in the pulpit, an 11-year-old on the organ, and a whole bunch of ukulele players. No offense. Even our organist is off today, and I hate to be the one to tell you, but there's no donuts for us either. And I would feel a little bit bad for all of you if it wasn't for that scene in the manger we've been talking about all week, that motley crew, that young girl from the middle of nowhere and a bunch of dirty, ill-reputed shepherds, not to mention livestock, that bore witness to the miracle of all miracles, the birth of our Christ. I'd like to share a poem with you. It's called Virgin. It seems everybody wants 3 to 5 years experience, except God. He is looking for the one who is willing to try something new. You see, at Christmas, we are reminded repeatedly about how God sees things in his way, and how often that way is at odds with the way of the world. The values born of the gospel in Bethlehem are that the lowly are lifted, the last are first, and in today's passage, the lost are found. This scripture passage is actually quirky enough to fit in on this ukulele of a Sunday. It's odd in its singularity. It is the only story we have of boy Jesus. We know a lot about his very early life, his birth, of course, and then his presentation at the temple with Simeon and Anna, toddler Jesus whom King Herod wanted killed and whom the Magi visited, but then nothing. No additional stories until this very episode when Jesus is 12 years old and missing. Then we won't have any more stories about teenage Jesus or young adult Jesus. We won't meet Jesus again until he's a man in his 30s, baptized by that child that leapt in Elizabeth's womb. In the story, we are reminded about the piety of Jesus' family. They were good Jews, ones that observed the law and celebrated the Passover. They were traveling by foot in a caravan to return home. There would have been chaos, livestock, divisions based on labor, not bloodlines. And so it was a little while before Jesus and Mary realized what was going on. We can only imagine their fear upon learning that Jesus is missing. It's every parent's nightmare, right? I can attest to that. Even though when we lose our children now, we have every privilege: security cameras, cell phones, automatic lockdown. But for Joseph and Mary, they could only return to Jerusalem as fast as their feet could carry them. When they find Jesus, Mary says, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching for you anxiously." Jesus doesn't understand. He wasn't lost. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. And so he says, with, I think, classic tween delivery, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know where I had to be?" Parents of middle schoolers, am I right? And then at the end of the passage, Mary's response is so wondrous. She treasures these things in her heart. Imagine that. The terror of discovering your missing child, the physical exhaustion of having to return by foot to Jerusalem, the elation of finding Jesus, and then the confusion upon his correction. She's not freaking out, falling apart, or running from this call on her life. She's treasuring all these things in her heart. Whoa there, Mary, that's awesome of you. I've lost it over far, far less in the Target checkout line with toddlers, but what a brave girl Mary was. Notice Luke uses this same phrase earlier in the gospel and once again in description of Mary when she first finds out from the angel Gabriel that she is pregnant with the Lord. She again has the same reaction. She treasures this thing. She ponders it in her heart. Another opportunity to freak out, to run, but Mary treasures, Mary ponders. I'm left wondering if this treasuring and pondering is in fact Mary's superpower. You see, when we met Job and we were told he was a good man, we were then told why. We were given his resume, his curriculum vitae. We find out all about his sinless lips and his burnt offerings. But when we are told that Mary is blessed among women, we're not really sure why. In fact, we may even wonder if her blessedness resides solely in being chosen for this special project, this call on her life. When Moses and Jonah were called, they ran from their calls, they hid, and those calls didn't even include labor and delivery. Not to mention the agony of the cross from the eyes of the mother. But this brave girl, this thoughtful girl, she doesn't run, she doesn't hide, she leans in. And then she treasures these things and she ponders them in her heart, just like she did with adolescent Jesus when what once was lost was actually found. The confusion in this story is not unlike the air of confusion that surrounds Jesus his whole time. One thing we can observe about the divine on earth is that it's so often misunderstood by kings and governments. Even Jesus' own disciples are depicted scratching their heads, wondering, what is he talking about? Like when they're napping in the boat, or when they just don't know how these few loaves can feed all these people. So we too, as disciples, followers of Christ in our own time, we can be confused. We can get lost. Just when we think we've got it all figured out, we can lose Jesus, just like Mary and Joseph did. At Christmas time, especially when Christ is seemingly so present, we can nonetheless lose Jesus. We can once again mark the occasion as a shopping accomplishment. We can once again overeat and overspend and make it seem like Christmas is Amazon.com's story to tell instead of, God's story to tell. We can get lost when we focus only on how God's Son came to earth and not why. Church, let's not lose Jesus again this year. Let's not tuck him away in storage totes and drag him to the basement until next year. Let's not be the type of people who could witness a miracle, the birth of a Messiah again this year, and then just go back to our normally scheduled lives. Let's not walk into New Year with the news that Christmas is over and we're on to something else. Christmas? Check. Let us find another way of looking at it. Let us treasure this thing and ponder it in our hearts. These words might help. They were written by pastor and poet Howard Thurman. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, then the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, and to make music in the heart. As givers, don't we all know the satisfaction that we feel after giving somebody something that they'll really use, they'll really love? That joy we feel every time we see them wearing that thing we made for them or we picked out for them, or a child who's playing with that toy that we just knew they would love. Well, can't we imagine that God has those same moments of delight every time we use the gift he gave us? Every time we use Jesus? Use Jesus might seem like funny language. He's not a gizmo or a gadget, but he was a teacher, an exemplar, someone given to us to show us how to live. So when we use him, when we utilize him as intended, we live lives informed by his teaching. We make decisions based on his wisdom. We, as students of a great teacher, need to demonstrate what we've learned. Isn't the goodness of our teacher reflected in our grasp of the material? So to truly utilize this gift we've been given once again this year, we must do the work of Jesus. We must be the hands and feet of Christ here on earth. That is how we make God delight in the gift we have received. It's a cliche, isn't it, to only put on that scratchy wool sweater Aunt Mildred knitted when she comes to dinner and act as if we always wear this thing. Well, that cliche applies to the gift God gave us too. We can just use Jesus on Sunday mornings or when we're engaged in some kind of church work, instead of using Jesus in our everyday lives. Thurman's words challenge us out of this confusion, for indeed the work of Christmas, it's ongoing. It's daily to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, and to make music in the heart. It strikes me that it is quite worldly to define this Sunday as Low Sunday. That's using earthly metrics and not divine priorities. Another way we could look at it is Faithful Sunday, for we are in the company of the faithful, the ones who seek opportunities to worship together, not look for excuses to skip. And so, listen here, faithful. If you received the gift of a Christ child on Christmas Day, then for the love of God, use it. Don't lose it. Don't let Christmas be lost on you. Don't be the type of person who can have a miracle befall on you and remain unchanged. live lives worthy of that gift you were given, because I know that it has been written that to whom much is given, much is expected. Let us treasure that, and let us ponder it in our hearts. Amen.